I just watched John Wick, but in World War II. Hey guys, welcome back to the video. In this video, guys, my spoiler-free review of Sisu. This movie follows a man deemed immortal by his enemies, and in the last days of World War II, after striking gold, he crosses paths with Nazis in northern Finland, and he must fight for his life to get home to redeem his gold and live out the rest of his life. Sisu comes out in theaters on April 28th, so if you're excited for it or if you've already seen it, let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Both wasting any more time, let's get right into it. I normally start off my reviews talking about the good, but I do want to start off with my major flaw about this movie, and that is that it's just an uninteresting story overall. The first act of this movie is just very, very slow. It introduces our main character. It's a fine setup, but honestly, it's just very boring. It's a lot of landscape shots. Again, it does a fine job introducing the actual story, but it doesn't do it in a very entertaining way. You do have a buildup of the general world, what's happening. Obviously, you find out it's World War II, Nazi stuff. You introduce the whole main story about the main character having to find the gold and then deliver it, actually trade it in for money. And that's the whole story of this movie. But again, they don't execute it in any interesting way at all. But what's so unique about this movie is the fact that there is so minimal dialogue. I would say in the first hour of this movie, there are barely any words spoken, and then towards the latter half you definitely have more speaking moments and just overall intense moments that require characters to talk to one another. But in the first 45 minutes to hour of this movie, there is barely any dialogue, and honestly I kind of dig that idea. Initially I was like, this is really cool. They're telling a story just through a pure visual medium. Obviously the score has to do a big chunk of how the emotions are affected, and the score is also really, really great. I'll talk about the technical aspects later in this video because the technical visual elements were also really interesting as the movie progressed. In the beginning, like I said, it looked good, like visually it was pleasing, but story-wise it just wasn't engaging. But my problem with the fact that there is such minimal dialogue in this movie is the fact that this story never fully pays it off. And so you never feel like this super bombastic creative decision is worth anything, because the main character says, I think, like 8 words in the whole movie, and the movie is an hour and 30 minutes long. But the fact that our characters are not speaking at all makes the movie feel way longer than it actually is. I think those in-between moments of the bigger action set pieces and just the really cool John Wick inspired action, that's where the movie really just slows down and doesn't bring anything to the table. That's why the evolution of the John Wick style of movies has just gotten better and better, because they tell a story that is unique in itself, and then they add in the action to complement it. One example of this is Bullet Train, in my opinion, but this movie does pretty much the complete opposite of that. Nothing outside of the action is actually entertaining. None of the characters, the sets, nothing is very interesting, whereas in Bullet Train, obviously it's very colorful, but you also have characters that are really interesting. Now, if Bullet Train had this idea of minimal dialogue, I think it would be a lot more useful in that scenario. But in this movie, you don't have anything else either, so nothing is there to push up that artistic choice of minimal dialogue. But now to talk about what I think everyone is excited for in this movie, because it is a John Wick inspired action movie that takes place in World War II. The action is awesome. I have pretty much no complaints with the action. I have one problem with the technical side of the action, the way that they were filming the hand-to-hand combat scenes. So I'll start off with that little gripe. But other than that, I absolutely love what they did with all of the action sequences here. It is a very, very dark movie, and it is overly gory. Let me tell you, I'm going to give a slight spoiler warning here. You can skip to the timestamp on the screen right now if you want to go in completely blind. The fights overall are just so creative. There's one where the main character puts his hand into the other character's gun holster and shoots the gun out of the opposite guy's gun holster into the opposite guy's foot. It is so cool and unique. There's another one where the main character takes a gun and puts it underneath the guy's chin and shoots it, and his scalp and helmet both come off. It is so gory, brutal, nasty, disgusting, but it is so much fun, and it's very brutal, but I think it works. Another connection I want to make in just an overall story sense mixed with the action is Nobody. Obviously, Nobody is heavily inspired from John Wick, but story-wise, it's kind of this old man, you know, who used to be in the war, and Nobody, he used to just be a very, like, aggressive dude, but they're just trying to mind their own business, and the fight comes to them. And you kind of see that same storyline play out here, and maybe it's just because I've seen so many of these John Wick-inspired movies that that this just feels like a replacement of a setting where you're making it World War II, you're adding in these smaller political elements, and that's pretty much it. The movie really doesn't do much else than that, in my opinion. But the final thing I want to talk about is the technical elements of this movie, because they are great. The visual and practical effects in this movie are absolutely awesome. If you've seen the trailer, you know there are some absolutely gory and insane shots, one of them including a leg flying off of a guy that gets exploded by a landmine. It is just super unique, super creative, and that's also just aided by, in general, amazing cinematography. It is very slow paced. It feels kind of pretentious, I'm going to be honest, the way that it's shot, because it's shot in such a hollow sense. You have these amazing smoke effects, fog effects, sunset shots, but they don't really bring anything other than actually looking cool. Sadly, in a cinematography sense, they don't really play with anything new. This is pretty much a new mixture of the John Wick style set in World War II with a guy that just wants to complete a very simple mission, but quite literally an army is after him. You have so many unique elements here, along with the fact that most of the movie is shot with amazing cinematography, but they don't really combine those elements, which just left me very disappointed. At the end of the day, the highs of Sisu are very, very high. It's nasty, brutal, and absolutely insane when it comes to the action, but in between those action set pieces, this movie is very hollow, and the story just ends up crumbling onto itself. Overall, I'm gonna give Sisu a 6 out of 10. Again, I personally enjoyed it, but I can definitely tell there are major flaws at the core of this film. As always, let me know what you thought of this movie in the comments down below, and if you're new in here and you enjoy all my movie and TV show reviews, reactions, and breakdowns, make sure to subscribe and notifications on so you don't miss any time I update a video or I go live. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.